Right. So this is about the permission sets in regard to the data cloud setup we do when we are working on the health cloud application, especially because in the previous session we discussed about health cloud fields, right? So what are the different fields do we have, right? So at the same time we have discussed even about filters creation, right? So how to create filters, right? So all that part was discussed. So now, in today's session, I'm going to discuss about the data cloud setup because the earlier one we discussed about the field services administration, all that. In reference to the provider and payer network is concerned, because whenever we are working on the health cloud application, as in when we know, whenever we are working on the health cloud application, so there are different services which can be used. Like for example, we can use health cloud application where health cloud console can be used. So wherein this health cloud console, either it can be provider network or a payer network, right? So all these things can be used in this because provider nothing but the people who are providing healthcare services. That part is all something comes under the health cloud part. At the same time, in context to the provider payer network is concerned, whoever the payers do we have. So healthcare organizations, all these things is what something we discussed. Next, we discussed about the business rules even in the last session. At the same time, especially when we are working on the health cloud administration point of view, health cloud administrative point of view, whatever the provider such we have, because in this provider such, whoever the providers do we have. So those details can be selected here, right? So for example, a medical therapist and as well as primary care are required. So wherein we must be knowing about the facility type, what kind of facility type you want to be so managed, right? So all this part was discussed in the previous session. But it's always important to understand about the data cloud setup is important because this data cloud setup nothing to do with either it can be a health cloud or it can be a sales marketing cloud, all that e-commerce cloud. It's always important for us to understand when we are working on the integration part because there are two things you need to understand. One is about the configuration, second is an integration. Configuration where whatever the required configuration according to the business rules you are making, that's all comes under the configuration point of view. But when it comes to the integration means what is that we are integrating, right? And how this can be integrated and how Salesforce application can be integrated with marketing or e-commerce cloud, all that. So in this regard, so if you can see here, when it comes to the permission settings, one of an example wherein I have taken for actionable segmentations per health cloud means when we are working on the health cloud application in Salesforce, whatever the required actionable segmentations you wants to be updated here, right? So wherein if you want to provide any kind of summary you want to be seen with, right? So or else if you want to see any kind of system permissions which are already existed, right? So you must be knowing about the system permissions. At the same time, it's always important for us to understand and create permissions for the objects also, because whatever the applications we are developing, object settings is also one of the key and prominent element wherein we will be seeing, right? So object settings, whatever the required objects you wants to be managed, right? So what are the different objects you want to be created from the data cloud setup point of view I'm talking about, right? So these are the different objects you can see, right? So different account type relations, or it can be account, or it can be appointment, right? So what are the reasons we have for the appointments? At the same time, asset relationships, or else it can be like care determinants or that, right? So this is also something wherein we need to do it. So in reference to the permission setups, especially it is always important for us to make some settings in the objects first. That is important because whatever the objects we have created, let's say for example, a account is an option we have created for as an object we have taken. So here we have to make necessary settings to the existing one, object settings, where we have to identify what are all the accounts which are essentially important, which accounts there are different accounts we have, right? So either it can be a record type for a business record type can be there, or it can be household record type, or it can be individual, or it can be a payer or a personal account, right? So these record types is what something which normally we have to select. Next, after that permission, we have to give a permission for enabling for them to read that, because administrative activity will be done by an admin people, whoever has the responsibility and who wants to make some changes and all, they will be doing it, not by the other people. Okay, that's the reason why when it comes to the editing point of view, whenever you are making any kind of changes to the existing ones, it's always important for us to enable, right? So whatever the enability we are doing, so that enability we need to see only for the reading perspective. That is what something which we have to add it. Next, required permissions, whatever the field permissions are required, whatever the required field permissions to be edited to the existing application, even field permission setups can also be done. Okay, so these are very important when we are working on the object settings. This is point number one. Next, apart from that, at the same time, flow process is also, because when you are creating any kind of business process flows for the existing application of the health cloud you are using, whatever the required permissions or whatever the required business process flows you want to be updated. Okay, so those business process flow access should also be managed here. Okay, business process flows, different business process flows we have. So whatever the required business process flows you want to be updated, right? So because the process flow may not be the same for all the organizations, depends on their business rules, what they have defined. These changes, I don't say the major changes, but the minor changes will also be taken into consideration. So that also, even that we need to update, right? So these actionable segments, health cloud. So that also we have to do when it comes to the flow access is concerned. Next, after flow access, next is about one of the important element about the system permissions. We need to make sure what are the required system permissions you want to be made, right? So when it comes to the system access is concerned, whatever the permission sets we have to do in context to the system permissions, either it can be a group membership. For example, if you want to enable any kind of group membership for the people, or if you want to manage any kind of health clouds, or else if you want to manage any kind of provider permissions where you need to enable some kind of service excellence platforms for the user side, or else if there is any kind of milestone components you want to be updated, all these things can be done. So these are all the important objects and as well as permission sets. At the same time, system settings is something essentially required whenever we are doing some data cloud, because you are managing the data in the cloud environment, which is always important for us to make the changes in the existing ones. This is what something which is important when we are working on the permission settings, especially whenever we are working on the data cloud setup itself is concerned, is what something being into the admin part, because as far as the administrative roles are concerned majorly, so administrative roles can be played by anyone, depends on the kind of project we are working on, depends on the kind of role we are managing, right? So whatever the required permissions you want to be managed, everything can be managed using this uh, data cloud setup, and whatever the required permissions, everything can be done here. So this is all about the permission settings when it comes to the data cloud setup, especially whenever we wants to use any kind of changes you want to make in the health cloud application. So either from the payer perspective, provider perspective, or a payer perspective is all about. So if you have any questions, if you have any queries, please reach out to the contact details which will be provided in below to this video. Thank you.